let's think about that passage now for a moment. And one way I thought that we could think about it was to tell you about a TV show that Hannah and I have recently been watching. It's called Race Around the World. Has anyone seen this? Yeah, a few people have. We've only started watching it recently, so we're already on the second series. But in this TV show, and it's a great concept, you get some 5 teams of people, and you take them to the other side of the world, and they've got to get from point A to point B, and it's a journey that we would usually take in a plane, but they're not allowed to go in a plane. They have to go from point A to point B over land using public transport and hitching lifts and things like that for the cost of the plane ticket. So that's their budget. They've got a very tight budget and they've got to go all the way over there, and they're allowed to work along the way, and they're also expected to take in some of the sights. So it's a bit of a travel show as well. So you get to see all sorts of interesting things. The first series, they had to travel the length of South America, going through all sorts of different countries. And the second series, which we're on now, they're going across Canada, which is a 7-hour flight. And they're going in a zigzag because they've got to get to checkpoints along the way. So they're not even going in a straight line. They're starting off down in the south and going up north and then back down. And it's a fun show. You get the dynamics of the teams. The teams are all couples. And, they're a married couple, or they're, a father and daughter, that sort of team. So there's the internal team dynamics and how they cope with the stress of being on the road in that way. And then you've got an insight into the local customs as well. You see how the people live. And one of the things that's really stood out in the Canadian leg is the kindness of Christians. They've come across quite a few Christians, and they've been some of the most helpful people in the journey, giving them free food and even taking them extra, trips, extra legs, free of charge. That's been great to see. So they're going on this journey, and it doesn't matter how they get to the checkpoint and how they get to the end. All that matters is which team comes first. Because if they get there first, they get the cash prize of £20,000. So they're enjoying themselves, they're travelling, and they're aiming for that goal. So it is a race. And this illustrates in many ways the great race that is life. Because in one sense, it does not matter if you are rich or if you are poor. It doesn't matter if you've got a high-powered job, or if you're struggling somewhere in the middle, or if you're living on benefits. It doesn't matter what ethnic group that you belong to. When you get to the end of your life, only one question matters. What is your relationship with Jesus Christ like? That's the only thing that matters. What is your relationship with Jesus Christ like? Because how you answer that question decides what comes next. If you've got a good relationship with him, then you could say that you've won. But if you've got a bad relationship with him, boy, have you really lost. If you've ignored him, or don't know anything about him, or even worse, know something about him and then decided to go your own way, then you're going to be in worse trouble than simply losing a race. But if you know who Jesus is and you've trusted in him and are continuing to follow him, then you're in a far better place than the person who has won the race and this £20,000. And one thing that's really good is that in Race Around the World, there's only one couple who can win. But in the race of life, there's no limit to those who can succeed, because we're told that everyone who trusts in Jesus will be saved. Everyone who trusts in Jesus will be a winner. So it's not about beating other people in a race, but it's all about whether or not you are in darkness or in light, which is how our passage today describes it. There's no in-between category. You are either on Jesus' side with him, or you are in darkness and against him. There is no middle ground whatsoever. And that's a shock to people today, because a lot of people think that there's middle ground. A lot of people think that if they've got 1 foot in the light and 1 foot in the darkness, it doesn't matter at the end of their life, because they've got that 1 foot in the light, because they go to church occasionally and they do some good deeds, they think that will be enough. They don't realise that being even a bit in the darkness disqualifies you. And other people think, well, I may be in the darkness now, but God is love, and how can he punish anyone? And I'm a special person, and therefore, when I get to the end of life, it doesn't really matter. God will let me in anyway, because that's his job. It's God's job to forgive us. But that idea is coming just from people's imagination. God is not some sort of impersonal force who's out there and automatically on your side. The true and living God is a person, and he has clearly told us what needs to be done. People need to trust in Jesus. And when they trust in Jesus, they are moving from the darkness and into the light. And they have to do this because, as we read here, we see that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. So you can't bring a bit of darkness with you. You've got to be in the light. That's one of the ways that God is described. So let's think about light for a moment. And one of the best ways of thinking about light is to just reflect upon darkness. So if you close your eyes, you're in the darkness there, and you can sort of move your head around, and you can usually tell when you're looking towards a window or something like that. Have you ever been in a place where there is no light at all? I have a few times. I used to enjoy going down into caves. And when you go on a cave trip or a trip down a mine, there's always a point when they turn the light off. And when you're deep down underground, there's no light at all. And even with your eyes open, you put your hand there, you can't see it at all. Darkness hides things. But as soon as the light is turned on, there's illumination. We can also think about sunlight, as well as allowing us to see. Light brings life, because if you know your biology, sunlight is needed for a chemical reaction called photosynthesis that occurs within green plant leaves, and that does two things. It turns sunlight and water and a bit of carbon dioxide into sugar, and that's the bottom of the food chain, the sugars that we find in plants. And there's a side product, a waste product called oxygen, which we need. So we see that light brings life on this as well. And it's good and it's clean, while darkness conceals and it's oppressive. In another part of the Bible, we read about how people, because they've turned away from God, they want to live in the darkness. John 3:19-20 says, "Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." So people hide in darkness, thinking that they can hide from God. And that's thinking about the ethical and moral aspect of light. Light stands for what is good, clean, pure, and holy. God is light, and if you're not with him, you are in the darkness. Those who walk in darkness show it through the thoughts in their head and the deeds that they do. So some of the deeds of darkness are lying, stealing, gossiping, gluttony, being ungrateful, anger, pride, impatience, being irritable, judgmental, being envious, being worldly. They're all considered deeds of darkness, or what God calls sin. And That's one of those words we don't like. We don't like that word sin, because we tend to just apply it to things like murder or adultery or something like that, something really bad, and we don't tend to see it in ourselves. But if we claim we have not sinned, we make Jesus out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. All of us have made mistakes, some worse than others, admittedly. Some of us may be nowhere near as bad as others, and you're just in the darkness there. Some may be much worse, and it's clear and everyone recognises that they are bad people. Everyone, whether you're in the darkness a little bit or whether you're in the darkness a lot, you need to be helped. You need to be rescued. You need to come into the light. And when you do that, the dirt and the stains become visible, which is why people want to hide. But when you trust in Jesus, you can be cleaned up. It is possible to walk in the light, to have fellowship with God and to have fellowship with other people. And this is a lovely Greek word called koinonia. And it's talking about a close association between people, emphasizing what they have in common. Koinonia means no one is left out. There is a sharing, a close relationship. It's a wonderful, loving partnership to be part of. And we can enjoy this sort of close relationship with God, to be part of the winning team, but not through anything we can do ourselves. Getting rid of your own sin is like trying to remove a tattoo with a bar of soap. It's just not going to happen. But what is impossible for us can be done by God. And this is where Jesus comes in. Ever since people walked into darkness, God has been working to make it possible for people to be forgiven, which is why at the right time, Jesus came and he fulfilled all of those prophecies. And he gave incredible evidence while he was alive that he is really the Son of God. And then he went and died on a cross. And what's happening there? How do we understand that? Well, to understand it, we need to remember that the wages of sin are death. So if you are in the darkness, then God will eventually take your life away from you. God is the one who is giving you life, and he will take it away. You will die. But God knew our position, and he is a loving and good God. So he sent his Son to stand in the place of those who would believe as a substitute. Now, we all understand about substitutes, especially if we watch football. Apparently there's some sort of football tournament on at the moment. Anyone watched any of that? I'm sure you're aware of the substitute. And the substitute is most of the time just like the person who's been taken off the pitch. So if you want to put on a substitute goalkeeper, you tend not to pick someone who specialises as a striker. You tend to pick another goalkeeper, don't you? Most of the time. That's what you do. And Jesus, to be our substitute, had to be just like us, which is why he was born, why all those prophecies were about him, and he lived a life, and then he had to pay the price that we owed because of our sin, the debt that we paid, which is why he died on the cross. And that's what the end of this is talking about here. If anybody does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sin. And that key word, atoning, means that when he died, he was there as a substitute, and he was taking away our sin. It was going on to him. He was paying the price in full, and his righteousness was given to us so that we could be reconciled back to God. And once you're reconciled back to God, you're moving from the darkness and into the light. And once you're in the light, you're with God. And it means that you've got nothing to fear. Because when we get to the end of the race. And we're all going to get to the end of the race, and we never know how long we've got. We're all going to get to the end of the race, and we're going to meet God. And the question is, what do you think? What do you know about Jesus? Are you someone who has trusted in him, or are you someone who has ignored him? And all those who trust in Jesus are the winners. They're the ones who are going to go on to an eternal existence with God in what we might call heaven, which is the worst day there will be better than your best day on earth. But for those who ignore God, ignore Jesus, those who kid themselves that they're all right and they think that they're in the middle, those people are going to go to a terrible place. A place of punishment, a place where all of God's blessings are taken away, a place of incredible regret, which will gnaw away at people for all eternity. They really will be those who have lost the race. So this morning, the question is, where are you? Are you still in the darkness, which is such a dangerous place to be? And if you're in the darkness, then I urge you to find out more about Jesus, to trust in Jesus. You can come and talk to me, you can come and talk to someone else who's in the church. We'll happily tell you more about Jesus. Because one of the great joys of the people who are in the light is that we get to tell others about what we have been shown, what we have been given. And we know that all who admit that they've done wrong and ask Jesus to forgive them, they will move from the darkness to the light. And they would have won the race that is called life. Amen.